Hi everyone, I'm Josh with Northern Frogger, and today I'm going to be setting up a vivarium. I'm going to be building this tank right here, which is an Exoterra. It's a 12 by 18 by 18, and this one's going to be a bit different as it's going to be a very basic minimalistic enclosure. I'm not going to be using any silicone or spray foam or anything like that today. This is just going to be a really basic quick build. I'm just going to kind of show you today kind of the bare minimum setup you need to create kind of a bioactive vivarium that's going to keep your dart frogs healthy and happy. This vivarium did house a gecko at one point, so the first thing I'm going to do here is just give this one a good cleaning, get everything out of here, get all my supplies together, and we'll get started. Alright, so I've got this thing all cleaned up here, ready to go, and everything else I'm going to need basically on the table here. So I'm going to kind of go through everything quickly just to show you what kind of materials you're going to need. So to start with, you need some kind of drainage layer. I like to use these hydro balls, or these expanded clay balls, and that's just going to allow the substrate to drain any excess moisture so it's not sitting there just saturated and soggy all the time. And so speaking of substrate, that's what I've got here, and that's going to be one of the more important parts of the vivarium build. And there's various recipes for substrates you can find on the internet. The one I'm using right now is kind of loosely based on the AGB mix, or the Arizona Garden Botanicals mix. And to go in between these two layers, you're going to need some sort of barrier layer. This is just like standard fiberglass window screen that you would get at like any hardware store. So on top of that, you're going to need some sort of hardscape. So I've just got some cork bark here and kind of some random rocks. Pretty much up to you what you use for that. Lots of different options. Cork bark is pretty good because it holds up to the humidity well. So that's kind of one of the main considerations for your hardscape. But any kind of wood that's basically meant for aquariums is going to work pretty well in a vivarium as well. You just want something that's going to be able to hold up to that humidity. And then just to kind of cap off the substrate, because some of the coconut fiber and stuff can kind of get stuck to the frogs, and they'll kind of track it around onto the glass and onto the plants and stuff. So to help keep it a little bit neater, and to kind of give your cleanup crew, like your springtails and isopods, somewhere to live, I'm going to kind of cap the soil with some more of this sphagnum moss and some leaf litter. And then the one other thing I've got here is just some like plastic food wrap, and I'm going to show you how to use that to kind of seal off the top of just one of these standard screen tops that come with these Exoterras. I am going to be putting a glass top on here eventually, but I don't have it right now, so I'm going to show you how you can do it with just some plastic food wrap. And that's just going to help maintain that high humidity that dart frogs need. And then lastly, I think the one thing I don't have on this table right now is you're going to need some sort of live plants. I'm just going to go around and prune a few tanks and throw those in here when I'm done. But I think we're ready to start here. So I'm going to start by putting the drainage layer in. So that's basically all you need to do for that. Just dump it into the bottom. I like to use somewhere between 1 inch to 2 inches. And next you just put the barrier layer in. So I've already got this one cut to size, and I just cut it slightly bigger than the size of the vivarium, just so it kind of folds up the edges a little bit, and it's going to try and keep that substrate out of there. So that basically just sits on top of there like that, and the substrate itself is going to hold that in place. But there's one more thing I just realized I forgot, so let me grab that. So the one other thing I like to do at this stage is put in my drainage tube. So I just use like this plastic tubing. I think this is like 3/8, and the inside diameter perfectly fits the 1/4 inch tubing, like standard airline or aquarium tubing. So basically this piece is going to go in here, just kind of tucked away in the corner there, and then when I need to drain it, I can stick, this is kind of my little drainage contraption here. I just have this hose I can stick into here, use this primer bulb to get a siphon going, and then this just goes down into a bucket or something and you can drain excess water out of the bottom there. So just kind of roughly measure up how much I'm going to need to stick out of the substrate there. I like to cut it a little long to start with, and then I can trim it down kind of just above the substrate afterwards. So that's just going to sit in there. You can silicone that into place if you want. I don't have any of mine silicone or anything. The substrate just kind of holds everything in place. So yeah, basically we're ready to add substrate now. Just double check that that mesh is still all in place. And then I just like to start putting it in the middle. So I just like to start by placing it kind of right in the middle there to get some weight on the screen. And then just kind of spread it out towards the edges. Try not to get any behind the screen. Just kind of getting it held up against the glass there. But that's basically going to do it for the substrate in here. And at this point you can kind of build a little bit of structure into your soil if you want some like hills or valleys or whatever. I like to kind of just slope it from back to front just because it kind of creates a little bit more depth visually in the vivarium. So at this point I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit of the sphagnum moss on top here. And then I'm going to kind of place some of this hardscape in here. So I've just got a bit of this cork bark. You kind of play around with whatever looks good here. I'm just going to throw a little bit more sphagnum moss and leaf litter to kind of cap off the soil here. And then it's basically ready to plant. So we're getting pretty close now. Basically all that's left to do is throw some plants in here. So I'm going to run around and prune a few from some other tanks and plant this up. Alright, so I've gone around, pruned a bunch of plants out of some other tanks. Changed the camera angle here so you guys can see what I'm doing a little bit better. Basically I'm just going to start putting these in. Alright, so I'm pretty happy with the planting here right now. I obviously have the luxury of having a lot of plants that I can just go take some trimmings and throw in here. If you're just getting into it, start with some easier, faster growing plants just to kind of fill it in, and then you don't have to buy as much off the bat. And then as your budget or whatever allows and your hobby kind of develops, you can kind of change things out as it grows and develops. And honestly, that's one of my favorite parts about this whole hobby is having the living vivarium that is just kind of ever changing and evolving as it grows. So that's basically going to do it for this vivarium. I'm just going to show you how to seal up the top to keep that humidity up. And then just going to basically let it grow in for a couple days, let the plants get established, and then I can throw the frogs in. Alright, so we're almost done with this build now. Last thing to do is just to deal with the top. So just temporarily here, I'm going to be using the kind of screen top that comes with it, and just this like plastic food wrap to seal it off and keep that humidity in. I am going to be getting a piece of glass cut for the top here, and for this one I'm just going to be setting it in place. Normally I would silicone these in, but I find with these really low exoteras here it can be a bit hard to get in through those short little doors there if you're trying to work in the back there. So for these short ones I like to keep the top removable. So when I get the piece of glass it'll just kind of be sitting in here, and then I usually just use some electrical tape to kind of seal off the gaps, make sure the flies can't get out, just because then it's easy to remove, and the electrical tape just kind of blends into the black trim here so you don't really notice it much. You can just take the plastic food wrap and just kind of wrap around the screen here to cover it up. But the way I prefer to do it is to put it across the top of this first. So I'm going to stretch a piece out over the top, making sure there's a little bit extra at the back here. I'm going to get this on here kind of tight, but I'm not really going to kind of push it down and seal it down yet. That's basically going to be the top, and then I just kind of sit this in place Sit the lid in place where it's going to go, and then I just kind of lift this up. And that should make a pretty good seal, especially once you turn these clamps. It's not going to be totally airtight seal, but you don't really want that anyway. It's going to allow a little bit of ventilation, but it's going to keep that humidity up and keep the majority of the flies in. I'm just going to use a razor blade here. Just to cut off the excess, but that's basically going to do it. So there you have it, set back up on the rack here with the light on top. So yeah, I'm just going to let this sit like this for a few days. Mainly I just want to get the plants established a little bit, just so the frogs don't like knock them over or trample them down, because they can be a little bit sensitive when they're first transplanted like that. And I just want to make sure I mist this really heavily for the first few days, just to make sure that moss gets established and those fresh cuttings can't dry out at all, because yeah, like I said, they're a little bit sensitive at this stage. The other thing I wanted to mention was the light I've got on top here. Really nothing fancy, it's just your standard kind of dome light fixture, and there's just like a standard household like LED light in there. And the only thing is that it's a daylight spectrum bulb, so I think this one's 5000K, but it'll work pretty good, like 5000 to 6500 Kelvin, somewhere in there. So that's going to do it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed that build. Just kind of wanted to show you that not every vivarium has to be a crazy intricate like spray foam background and everything. You can do a fairly quick and simple build like this, and relatively cheap too. I put this thing together in less than an hour from start to finish here, and I think it turned out pretty good. I think it'll look even better once all the plants grow in a little bit more, but I'm pretty happy with this. Hope you guys enjoyed it too. Thanks so much for watching. If you guys did enjoy this video, please hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already. Let me know your comments or suggestions or questions about this down below there. But other than that, thanks again for watching, guys, and until next time, happy frogging.